And welcome back. We are going to continue our pixel art journey. Let's go ahead today and now take things to the next level. Up to this point, we have been doing images in 8x8. So that gives us 64 pixels to work with, which of course is a decent amount of pixels. But let's say we want a higher quality image, because after all, 8x8 is pretty small. What's if we were to double that? All right, so we're effectively squaring the number of pixels we have, which we go to 16 by 16. So let's go ahead and create a 16 by 16 just to see how that looks in comparison. So 16 by 16, again, no artboards. We're going to leave it with white. And let's go ahead and click create. Now you can see our square is slightly bigger because again, we have, of course, doubled the length of the width. So let's do Control 0. And I'm going to do my brush over this. And you can see that this brush is, of course, just slightly smaller looking now because we now have 16 of these pixels that run across length and width. So we have a bigger canvas to work with. By comparison, if we look at a pineapple that we did before, you can see that this is a much bigger square. Even though this brush size has not changed at all, like it's still 1 pixel, it is literally smaller because we have a larger canvas area to work with. Now, of course, I could zoom this in more to get the brush size to be the same, but then I might run into the issue of trying to mimic, the same amount. So let's see if we can take this same image that we did here with the pineapple and see if we can recreate that, but now at a larger scale. So to start off, let's go ahead and go back to here. Let's use our color picker tool to start off with. Perhaps let's do this orange that we used to start our pineapple with. Now, if you remember, we had kind of started that roughly in the middle. Now, one of the advantages that we have now of moving to 16 by 16 is that we can actually make our shape a little bit more rounded because we have more pixels that we have available to work with. It is not necessarily confined to the same spectrum that we had before. Before, that pineapple was kind of confined, but now look at how much bigger we can make it simply because we have more pixels that we can work with. And because we have more pixels that we can work with, we can make our shape, therefore, much more defined. Now, of course, from a high point view, like from these thumbnails, it's like, oh, this doesn't look too bad. But we know that when we zoom in on those 8x8 pixels, it looks like a pineapple, but it may not be perfect. All right, let's go ahead and color pick the green. And we'll go back to our brush tool and let's go ahead and paint up some green here. All right, it doesn't have to be a perfect mimicry of this, but we are going to try to imitate it to an extent. All right, again, color picker tool, and we can use the eyedropper tool there to kind of help us out with that. All right, let's go ahead and use this shade right here to act as our checker pattern that we had done last time. So hit B from my brush tool. And I'm just going to use that to break up this just like we had done last time. Okay, and let's go ahead and grab this lighter yellow that we had done to represent the part that was kind of sitting more in the sun. We're going to go ahead and just kind of put that across here for now. Of course, we will do some more value and contrast as we get into things, but right now we're simply just doing a 1-for-1 ratio to go ahead and create this pineapple. So let's go ahead and make these ones lighter. All right, and let's go ahead and again, color picker tool, grab the light green here. Use my brush tool to kind of fill some of that in. And see, we can add a little bit more dimension and depth now. And let's, of course, do our blue that we had in this image. So I'm going to start with the dark blue there at the bottom. Now, of course, I can, just do 2 layers of this if I want to start, simply because I have more depth to work with. And then we can always take and use the actual colors here to try and find something that's a little bit more in between those 2 color ranges. All right, and so now I've created this pineapple, and you can see that we have our different contrast and values here. But now because I have more pixels to work with, I can go even more with the contrast. I can add even more shading and more dynamic levels. So for example, if I come back here to my pineapple, before we kind of used about 4 different tones to represent this pineapple. And it's not a bad set of tones. However, maybe I want to change this up a little bit. Maybe I want to add some different colors to it. So for example, let's say I go to this yellow here, and let's use my color picker. And maybe I want to desaturate that yellow a little bit. All right, because maybe it's been sitting out in the sun for a little bit and it doesn't have as much rich tones to it anymore. All right, and maybe I want to use now the orange here, and let's go ahead and look at that and say, you know what, that's a pretty nice orange, but maybe that needs to be a little bit more saturated. Maybe we want a little bit more richness to certain of these colors, so some of these pop out just a little bit more. Because if you look at things in real life, you don't have necessarily uniformity. You don't have this, monochromatic approach to things in nature. And so let's go ahead and do that here a little bit with the dark ones too. Let's go ahead and take some of those. We're going to go ahead and make some of these actually move deeper into the color palette here. And I'm just going to color a few of them here, just a few here and there. And now let's address the leaf area here. This is probably the area that we can actually express the most amount of change. Because right now we have this very dark to this nice jump here. So I'm actually going to choose the darker green. And I'm actually going to move it up just a little bit. So that way when I use my brush tool now, I can actually come in here and kind of break apart some of these greens just a little bit. So that way I'm not looking at this large jarring section that I had before. And that almost makes it kind of look like there's a leaf pattern going on here now. In fact, I can kind of replicate that to go on the other side a little bit as well if I want. And maybe I want to color pick this bright green that I had done. And maybe actually desaturate that a little bit. Just desaturate, maybe take a little darker too. And add just a little bit of some of those color tones around it. Just to kind of add a little bit of desaturation to break this up a little bit. All right, and now when I look at my thumbnail, wow, that's really looking like a pineapple in comparison to when we had our 8x8 image. Like, yeah, you can see that's a pineapple, but then when you look at this looks even more like a pineapple. And that, of course, is the power of being able to have more pixels to work with. And then next time, let's see what we can do when we increase it further to 32 by 32 pixels, just to see how much richer an image can look.